Hello and welcome to Team Talk. I'm James Williams, and joining me to talk all things Lincoln City today are Mark Wiley from the Lincolnshire Echo and BBC Radio Lincolnshire's Rob Makepeace. Chaps, it's been a tough couple of weeks for Lincoln, losing 1-0 at Wimbledon on Saturday. There'll be no FA Cup heroics this year. Yeah,
it's a shame. A more traditional Lincoln FA Cup exit, if you like, out at the first round to a League One side. A few positives to draw from the game. They dominated the second half, but it was a similar story, I'm afraid. They just couldn't find the net, and it was a match that hinged on two mistakes. Wimbledon took advantage of the mistake in the Lincoln defence, mistake from the Wimbledon keeper early in the second half. Billy Knott should have hit it first time, but he couldn't take advantage, and that was the story of the match.
And Rob, there's a real problem with the lack of goals at the moment in Lincoln.
Really struggling to score. We seem to say this every week, don't we? The chances are there, but Lincoln aren't putting them away, and they've got strikers that are lacking in confidence. I think Matt Green in particular is really lacking in confidence, and he's the man you expected at the start of the season to be the main goal getter for Lincoln. You never expected Ollie Palmer and Matt Reed to be banging in goals every week in, week out. He was the man, though, Matt Green, that people were probably looking towards, and it looks like that Akinola deal at the end of August, which didn't go through, seems to be ever more pivotal in Lincoln's season.
And Akinola's scoring goals for Barnet now, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to be a bit of a turning point for him at Barnet. He looked destined to join Lincoln. He stayed at Barnet, and he's doing really well for them. And it would surprise me if Danny didn't go back in for him in January. But the way he's going at Barnet, they're not going to want to let him go. He's doing really well for them. They've got one of the main strikers out with a long-term injury. So it remains to be seen if Lincoln would actually be able to get him if they went for him in January.
And Rob, how do we solve this problem? How does Danny and Nicky County solve the problem of the lack of goals? You've spoken about confidence. They tried a different formation on Saturday. It's still not really worked, has it?
No, it's really difficult. And I think this is probably the frustration of the transfer window, actually, the fact that you can't have loan deals anymore. In the past, if a club at League 2, League 1 level was struggling, maybe they had a defensive crisis or struggling to create goals or needed goals, they could get somebody in on loan, and they could get somebody who's not playing football to come and play for them for a month or 2 months or whatever it might be. However, because of the transfer window, Lincoln are stuck. They can't change anything realistically. Yes, they can change their shape slightly or change the way they play slightly, but it's really frustrating. You look at the success England have had at the World Cup level. We've seen the under-17s win the World Cup. I think it was the under-20s won the World Cup. If you look at those teams, how many of those players are actually now playing first-team football? Next to none. They'd be much better going out to a League 1 or League 2 side for a month or two and getting first-team football. But for Danny Cowley and Lincoln City, we know that can't happen. It's frustrating. There's nothing they can do about it till January. And trying to solve the goal-scoring problem, I don't see where the solution's going to come from at the moment. It's really difficult because Lincoln have a style of play, and that's the way they will stick to.
Mark, Lincoln need a Theo Robinson or someone of that sort that had the effect.
Well, that's it. I mean, they brought in Cameron Stewart, who's a winger, who was a free agent, but I think Theo Robinson might have been a bit of a one-off. Players are often free agents for a reason, and if they're that good, maybe the Championship and League One clubs will be looking at them. As Rob says, I think it'd be nice if they could go out and bring in a young player from a higher league club. And I think, in my opinion, they should keep the loan window open so young British players can go and play for League One and League Two clubs. It's going off on a slightly different debate, but rather than having these under-21 teams in the Checkatrade Trophy, I think that would be a better way to go about things, but that's not the rule. They just have to try and get through until January. And the positive thing for me is that while they're really struggling to score goals, they're still ninth in the league, 3 points off the playoffs, probably going through to the next round of the Checkatrade. So they're in a decent position, despite the fact there is a lot of areas for improvement. I'd rather be in that position than being ninth and say we're getting the absolute maximum out of the squad. There's no money to spend. That isn't the case. There's going to be money to spend in January. The squad will be stronger in January. So if Lincoln could just hang around this position at Christmas, I'd be really positive about the second half of the season.
And defensively, Lincoln have been very good and continue to be very good, Rob.
Yeah, apart from Rob Dickey's mistake on Saturday, there's not been many mistakes for Lincoln City in defence this season. And you've got Luke Waterfall came in on Saturday, but he currently sat on the bench most weeks. And he'd do well in a League Two side like Lincoln. So defensively, that's what's helping Lincoln as well. They're not going behind constantly every week in, week out, making defensive mistakes. Because if they go behind, you do start to think, how are they going to get back into this game? They're very solid at the back. Neil Erdley, who signed his contract extension, has been fantastic. I think Sean Long obviously is back in the side now. It'll be interesting to see if he manages to keep his place in the next couple of weeks. And I think Josh Vickers as well. Many people doubted that decision as to bring in Josh Vickers in for Paul Farman. Paul Farman, a fan's favourite at Lincoln, but I think Josh Vickers has done extremely well in the time he's played in goal.
And it's a frustrating time, isn't it, for Lincoln fans? Obviously, when their team aren't scoring goals and aren't really entertaining. But they've had it good in the last year or so, and it's important now, I suppose, for them to stick with their team.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, we've been spoilt over the last 18 months. We've seen goals, memorable games, just going through a bit of a dry spell at the moment. But, let's remember the progress we've made. It's less than 2 years ago we were playing in front of at home crowds of less than 2,000 and losing to, non-league clubs who've come up from lower divisions. So, let's remember the positives. We're still in a good position. And as Rob says, despite the fact we're struggling to score, we're still in games. And we're still giving ourselves a chance to win games with the odd set piece. And that's what we'll think we're going to have to do between now and Christmas. Perhaps we're going to have to grin and bear it and grind out a few more 1-0ers.
I think the point of that as well is you could be a club like Chesterfield propping up the Football League out, the FA Cup. They were expected, they were one of the pre-season favourites for the title. And, look at them, a League One club, obviously, as well. And they're really struggling. Lincoln could be in that position. It could be a lot worse. We know what it's like to be in that position and be down struggling at the bottom of the table. So I think, as Mark said, it's bearing in mind is, as a Lincoln fan, would I have taken 9th going into November? Of course I would. That's, at the start of the season, I thought 9th, 10th, that's a good season for Lincoln.
Look at Mansfield as well. I mean, they're 14th at the moment? All the money they've spent on, supposedly quality strikers, and they're really struggling. I mean, who would have thought that Lincoln would be above Mansfield at this stage of the season, despite the fact Lincoln have got all these goal-scoring issues. So there are some positives out there if you look hard enough for them.
Interesting team news on Saturday. Sean Raggett didn't play for Lincoln. Does that suggest that Norwich will keep him at Carrow Road after January?
Keeping their options open, aren't they? I think that's the main thing. With Norwich not entering to the third round of the FA Cup, that could be Sean Raggett's Norwich debut. I think it will depend where Norwich are in the table. If they are in around about the playoff positions, will they then go off and buy another centre half? Somebody who's not playing Premier League football and try and strengthen to try and get promoted to the Premier League, and then will Sean be allowed to go back out on loan? Of course, I think it could be that Lincoln, if Sean is going to come back in January, they could be without him for three and a half weeks of January, and it could be in the final week of January or the final day even. Lincoln might be relying on Norwich getting a player in to get Sean Raggett back on loan. I'm sure after what happened in August, Danny Cowley won't want that situation, and he'll have irons in the fire in terms of centre-half targets.
Turn our attentions to the Checkatrade Trophy. Tomorrow night, Notts County come to Sinsel Bank. Another chance maybe for Danny Cowley to play around with his formation, play around with his front line and try and get some confidence into his strikers.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those games with the pressure largely off, that they can kind of go for it a little bit, maybe be a slightly more attacking minded. I think there'll be a few changes. We'll see Paul Farman in goal. I'd like to see Elliot Whitehouse get a chance, and there are a few fans who think Elliot Whitehouse should get a chance in the league games. Midfielder with an eye for goal, could be the man sort of Lincoln need at the moment, so I'm sure he'll play. Be interesting to see if Ellis Chapman gets more of a run out. He played last 20 against Everton under 21s the other week. Will he start the match? I mean, he didn't look out of place when he came on. So, there's a bit riding on the game as well. I mean, Lincoln are pretty much through, but they do need a point to be absolutely sure of going through to the next round. So, might be a good game to have to restore a bit of confidence.
Another away trip to Crewe on Saturday, Rob.
Yeah, Crewe have struggled this season so far. They're a side that seem to be stuck in League Two. They're like the Rochdale of old, I think, aren't they? Rochdale spent so many years in League Two and don't seem to be going anywhere, and that's what's happening with Crewe at the moment. But it's always a difficult place to go. And Lincoln are going to be in for a tough game. Crewe don't score many goals. Lincoln don't score many goals. Again, that'll probably turn out to be a classic. Now, be a 4-3 or something like that. But it's going to be a difficult game for the Imps. But if they can get through in the Checkatrade Trophy, and I think Danny Cowley, because of the form Lincoln are in at the moment, and they're not hitting great strides in terms of the league, Danny can say to his players tomorrow night, look, this is your chance. The players who are coming in, you've got an opportunity to prove why you should be in the side on Saturday. Whereas before, when they go to these games, if they've been on a run of good form, it's hard for them to change the team too much from the run of form that they've been in the league. Okay, well, that's about it for this week. Thanks to Rob and Mark for joining me. Hopefully we'll see a few more goals between now and our next show next week. Goodbye.